author of The Bloodlights, If Nothing Else, Eve. We've enjoyed The Fruit and The Language of Crows. She is the co-editor of Dancing in the Shadows, a tribute to Anne Rice, and a regular contributor to The Pen of the Damned and The Ladies of Horror. When not writing, Elaine can be found on her paddleboard. For Strong Women's Strange Worlds, she invites authors to participate in readings. Elaine, over to you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm the first Elaine of the day, and I'm going to be skipping around on a story called The Middle from the upcoming anthology, Anterior Skies. And this may be the very first horror paddleboard story. The Middle. See where those boats are? You want to hug the coast over there. Don't go toward the middle. Just keep hugging the coast. The man at the rental shack winked as he pocketed their signed waivers. Legend is, people don't come back from the middle. Is there an undertow? Kara asked as she grabbed a paddle from the rack. The man squinted and looked to the area he had just been mentioning. Nope, nothing like that. Brett mumbled to his wife as they were strapping the paddleboard leashes to their ankles. He's just trying to scare us away from the best spots. Probably the best fishing or something. That's what locals do to tourists. We aren't fishing. Doesn't matter. They want to keep the best stuff for themselves. Kara picked up her board and moved to the opening. I suggest we listen to him. I had that feeling, remember? And then that dream. Brett hoisted his board and followed her. I refuse to check under the bed for any of those monsters you dream about. I never make you check. Her eyes turned angry, and he could see her revisiting the times that she had needed him, and he had disappointed her. Not that I'd mind checking, he added sheepishly. He saw her shiver despite the warmth of the water she'd walked into. It felt so real, though, in that growl. I could still hear it after I woke up. I understand it upset you, honey, he said, using words he'd recently been trained to use. Let's try to enjoy our day, though. He walked a few steps past her before getting on his board. He had always liked to lead their trips. He was stronger, and if they stumbled upon a ripcord or other misfortune, he believed he'd be able to work his way out of it and warn her, if not rescue her. Until recently, he believed that as long as he was in charge, everything would be okay. Despite the hits that belief had taken, he still wanted to be the one to test the waters first. As her husband, it was the least he could do. Hug the shore, she called. He nodded and waited for her to follow. The day was warm and the water was like glass. Brett and Kara were able to skate along at a speed and ease they rarely experienced. This is paradise, Brett mumbled, almost afraid to say it out loud. Kara interpreted her dreams religiously, and he had developed compulsive beliefs of his own. Kara had heard a monster in her dreams. He saw monsters behind every promise. A boat zigzagged along the channel, trying to either throw or excite the people laying on the large tube that had been tethered to the back. The boat driver was behaving recklessly, and Brett knew a thing or two about bad choices. Kara called up to him to stand down. She was referring to his temper, which had gotten them in trouble before. She had also made him promise that they would have a good day. His transgression was never completely behind them, but they could smile and laugh and try to act as if they hadn't a care in the world. He had promised her a good day. It had been the least he could do, even though he knew what was behind every promise. He had truly thought he loved Tanya. He'd convinced himself that his unhappiness had been Kara's fault. He'd convinced himself that she had needed too much from him, too much of him. With Tanya, it had been easy, excitement and passion, even though it had been very brief, even though it had destroyed his life. Let me know if you needed anything or want to stop and drift for a bit, he called back to Kara. He had always taken care of Kara. When they had unexpectedly become parents, he had taken care of all of them. He had blamed Kara for the pregnancy, even though they had both been equally surprised. She had been on birth control, and it had always worked. Yet he felt like she had trapped him. Their friends had been settling down and getting married and starting families, and he had believed she had manipulated him. He had gone along with everything to a point. The wedding, the new house, the family life. Eventually, the lack of control had gotten to him. It had taken some time and some therapy, but he had learned to accept accountability. He had made a mistake. He'd been selfish, and it had cost him financially, personally, and professionally. It would be inaccurate to say that Kara's family had disowned her for his transgressions, but they had stopped visiting. They no longer called her or included her in events if it meant that he was part of the package. It was also inaccurate to say that he had lost his job. but it had become impossible to work at a place where so many people could no longer look him in the eye because of what they had seen. Honey, Kara's voice had a nervous tone. Something feels off about my board. They moved closer to the mangroves and sat down on the boards. Brett thought that he was wearing his best poker face, but Kara was sensing something different. When he asked if she were holding the paddle correctly, she became angry. Of course I am, and it's not the paddle, it's the board. I know what it's supposed to feel like, and this feels wrong. Please don't act as if I'm a newbie or can't handle the board. She had been the one to introduce him to paddleboarding, but somewhere along the line, he had taken the role of leader. There's a drag. It's like something's pulling it from beneath, hanging on and weighing it down. Let me see. Brett lowered himself into the water and waded to Kara's board. As he was feeling around underneath, something caught, like a fishing line. The boat with the tubers being towed made another pass. They were dangerously close this time, and Brett could see the bodies on the tube belonged to young kids who laughed raucously as the wake nearly shook them loose. The wake also rocked Brett and Kara. Brett ended up with a mouthful of water. They're going to get someone killed, he said after he finished coughing. There always has to be at least one asshole, Kara agreed. Brett pointed to the other side of the channel. There's no one over there. And look at how the water's so still. There's no current. She shook her head, the extended brim of her hat punctuating the motion. We can't cross over, that man said. We can go fast, really book it through the middle. Brett, listen to me. She'd been saying that a lot lately, like when she had protested moving back in with his parents as a means to attack the debt they had accrued. Like when she pleaded with him to ignore the company that had promised to recover both the video and the stolen money. Kara had said it was too late. She'd already seen the video, and that was all that mattered. She had smelled another scam. He hadn't listened to any of those petitions, but he would listen this time. It was the least that he could do. The sun had become unforgiving. The boats were keeping to the shallows and rocking the couple with waves so that standing on the board had become an acrobatic feat. Brett felt his paddle knocking against the compact sand on the floor of the ocean. The tide's really dropping out on us. Should we head back? He looked over his shoulder to see her frown. It's okay. We can keep going. I just don't think it's going to work here. It's a struggle when it's this shallow. It's deeper over there. He pointed to the center. Brett, that man said not to go there. He tried a different tactic. I bet we see dolphins or at least big fish out there. Brett. He was growing tired of hearing her repeated argument, but therapy had taught him to listen. It had also taught him to realize that his wants were not always of primary importance and that his perception was sometimes off. I still feel that tug, she said. It's so weird. It's not the current. It's pulling in the opposite direction of the current. Do you want to stop again? No, I want to have a good day, she laughed. That's still possible, isn't it? He turned and smiled at her. She looked young and happy on the board, the way she had looked when they had been dating. The worry lines on her face were no longer visible, and he couldn't help but take in the curves her bathing suit made noticeable. Anything's possible, he replied. He winked, forgetting she wouldn't see it through his sunglasses. Let's keep going, she suggested. I think the workout will do us both some good. Your wish is my command, he said, and he meant it. Giving her a happy day was the least he could do. Despite the waves from the boats rocking his board, Brett had been able to peer over his shoulder to check on Kara periodically. She had been wearing a bright pink shirt with a graphic of a dolphin that looked like it was composed of stained glass. She also had the extended brim hat that made her easy to spot, even peripherally. He could no longer see her. And I'm going to end there.